What's going on, guys? Special thanks to Nintendo for providing a review copy of The Legend of Zelda Age of Calamity, a prequel to Breath of the Wild set 100 years prior to the events of the first game. To not spoil the experience for other people, I'm strictly going to be focusing on the gameplay as a result rather than story elements. I will say, however, players are definitely in for a treat. Keep in mind, I am not really that much of a fan of the Zelda series, nor have I played most of the Zelda games. However, my opinions, of course, are my own, and I'm going in blind to the story of not only Age of Calamity, but of course, Breath of the Wild. So, I'm going to, in fact, start with the prequel first before I play Breath of the Wild, which will give me a much different experience than most of the people who have played, quote unquote, correctly by starting out with Breath of the Wild. Hope you guys enjoy. Let's get into it. As a big fan of the Dynasty Warriors games, it always makes me super happy to see Nintendo throw their IPs over this exciting hack and slash style of a game. It isn't your generic hack and slash game where you basically just kill enemies over and over and over. Well, I mean, when you play those games, that's how you feel. But there's a lot of twists when it comes to Nintendo throwing their IPs over these games, of course, trying to incorporate a story of their own with the enhanced Dynasty Warriors gameplay. I am actually a big fan of these crossovers. I was a big fan of Fire Emblem Warriors. I played that game a lot, and it's still one of my most played Switch games to date. Of course, I tried Hyrule Warriors when it first came out, and I fell in love with that as well. And as someone that's not a fan of The Legend of Zelda that much, these games actually do keep me interested and at least a little bit up to date with the lore of some of these characters and game elements. So, in terms of gameplay and combat in Age of Calamity, of course, you're going to be fighting hordes and hordes of enemies. No, not a couple, not 7, not 8. You're going to be fighting hundreds upon hundreds of enemies over and over, characters spawning in over and over. Even if you defeat some, guess what? Look to your left, look to your right. There's going to be more. And to be honest, that's not a bad thing because it always gives you something to do and something to be fighting. And by defeating enemies, you'll gather materials, of course, to craft new weapons, new items, or even to complete quests on the out-of-game map. And of course, by completing those quests, you're rewarded with upgrades, even sometimes EXP that will end up boosting your health as well. The gameplay is a lot more fleshed out and unique than previous Warrior-style Nintendo games. Age of Calamity features a lot of button variants to allow for different special options unique to each character. This allows for more fluid gameplay and interesting options in combat, in my opinion. To be honest, I am a big fan of the way Link operates in this game versus a game that I play often like Super Smash Bros. I actually think that this game allows you to see a lot more things that Link is capable of. So I'm a big fan of the different types of specials they gave him in this game and the way he fights overall. The game makes use of its unique cast and enemies to spawn different objectives throughout a level to make sure the game does not feel as repetitive and not turn into a simple hack and slash based game. Of course, if you were just killing enemies over and over, the game could feel pretty repetitive, but there are different challenges that pop up while you are playing the game in real time to keep you on your toes. And of course, there are certain things that you have to do in order to be able to progress through the game. Of course, maybe turning on a tower to defeat a guardian. And throughout the game, you'll have more and more unique objectives that you have to complete in order to progress. And I feel like it always keeps the game fresh and of course adds to the story element of the game, depending on where you are in the game. Now, with tons of enemies comes issues. And I'm not talking about difficulty because I've been playing the game on very hard and I'll tell you that it does suck to get hit. But the game suffers from FPS issues, frames per second, due to the limitations of the Switch hardware. In my opinion, when you have a lot of enemies spawned at once, the game will drop frames at times. I don't think that it takes away from the game overall, but it does make the game appear jittery at times, and to be honest, it does slow down the overall immersion into the game. However, it was something that I was able to get around and continue enjoying the game as I normally would. Not only do you earn items throughout your playing the game, but you can also earn rupees through levels to buy items from merchants that grant resistances and more during in-game battle. You can also sell materials to earn more rupees to further buy items, a nice touch to rewarding players for in-game success. You can also visit a blacksmith to forge together weapons you already own to create stronger weapons. Some weapons will even feature unique passive abilities that will aid you in battle. This will of course also cost rupees, but I do think it's a nice touch to be able to forge weapons in this game because, especially in very hard mode, sometimes it's hard to kill an enemy. And if you are able to craft something a lot stronger to get the job done, it's going to benefit you in the long run. And of course, I just like little touches that allow players to not only progress through a level, but also reward them for accomplishing objectives. Because if you barely got anything for killing a swarm of enemies or for killing a challenge or any of that, I feel like it would kind of be annoying, but they do a good job at making sure that you are rewarded for almost everything that you do. The game has a memorable cast of characters from Breath of the Wild, some looking much younger this time around than others, of course. Impa has quickly become my favorite character due to her cute personality on top of exciting gameplay. She's also very curious as well, and I kind of think that's cool. You can play as Link, Zelda, Impa, Urbosa, Mipha, or Daruk. Excuse me if I butchered any of these names, by the way. And more throughout the game. Each character has a set of unique specials and normals, and I feel like they all bring something different to the table. And I really do like that. When I was looking at this game, I wasn't expecting that many characters to be playable, to be honest, versus something like Fire Emblem Warriors, which had so many different characters. But to be honest, Age of Calamity did a good job introducing many characters, more than I actually thought it would introduce. So I think they did a great job with characters, and I think the costume design is also phenomenal. The level design in Age of Calamity mimics your typical Dynasty Warrior game. You defeat enemies to secure objective hideout locations and of course to progress through the game in real time to earn special objectives that you have to do to progress the story. Age of Calamity also copies, of course, the visual style of Breath of the Wild, making it one of the most beautiful games on the Switch to date. Stampedes of enemies will swarm you, but you are well equipped to deal with them due to the range of your weapon. Some of these characters have massive hitboxes on their normals, so you'll always be taken care of when it comes to fighting off hordes and hordes of enemies. Each level also contains mini-bosses that are a lot stronger than the average grunts that you'll be fighting, and they'll be located at hideouts for you to defeat in order to capture the hideout. These enemies are a lot stronger, but with solid play, you're rewarded for last-minute dodges, resulting in the ability to shatter their defense and perform a strong attack to defeat them or substantially reduce their health. So don't be intimidated when you fight a mini-boss. The level layouts may feel repetitive if you're not used to Warrior-style games, but Age of Calamity does a good job at keeping settings fresh, and the game is visually rewarded with the Breath of the Wild graphical scheme, as noted before. For players that are avid collectors, you can also find Korok seeds throughout levels. Some levels have multiple seeds, so be sure to be on the lookout for them in the ground. The in-game map of the game is very easy to digest and simple enough to use to navigate to objectives. The start menu also allows dialogue to be revisited as well as items to be looked at. You have the ability to replay maps over again, and the out-of-game map is very easy to explore and is pretty easy to understand, so it's not that intimidating when you're trying to look for more things to do in the game. Each aspect of the game is accompanied by beautiful melodies and tense battle music that is traditional throughout the Zelda series. Sometimes I would leave the game running at the out-of-game map menu because I love the theme so much. It's really a beautiful theme, and I do hope it comes to other games. Age of Calamity is lucky enough to be multiplayer, but we have to talk about the multiplayer because this is one of the more frustrating sections of the game that I had to deal with. While having the option for multiplayer was fun, I found it a little difficult at times to fully enjoy the gameplay due to it being very strenuous on the console. The game began to slow down a bit, but it was bearable enough to play with a friend. Playing with a friend makes taking down enemies and objectives not only more enjoyable, but of course more rewarding. However, especially when doing specials, AoE specials, the game would really drop. And I'm saying drop probably to like 15 frames per second, and it's not very visually stunning for that to happen, and sometimes it affected gameplay. Again, not to the degree where we had to turn the game off, but it was very noticeable. A long time desire I personally have for Warrior-style games is online co-op play. I personally believe this will be a lot easier for the Switch not only to handle, but it will make the game a super easy purchase for those wishing to play this game with friends that live far. It seems like a continued missed opportunity that would do so much for the series, especially during COVID, where the world is impacted by a pandemic. I think that online play is something that developers pretty much have to do at this point if they're developing multiplayer games, because it's hard for people to be together during this time. Overall, as someone who has struggled to get into the Legend of Zelda series for years, Age of Calamity takes one of my favorite style of action games and layers it with a beautiful story, beautiful music, and enjoyable combat. This game has allowed me to capture the magic of one of gaming's most iconic characters and makes me want to give future Zelda installments another chance. This game has single-handedly made me want to play Breath of the Wild to see and learn exactly what happens after the events of this game and to prepare for the release of Breath of the Wild 2. The only difficulties I truly had with this game were the frames per second issues in single player mode and a lesser optimized multiplayer mode. With all of this in mind, I give The Legend of Zelda Age of Calamity a 7 out of 10. For fans and newcomers all alike to both the Zelda and Dynasty Warriors series, this is a must pick up for the holiday season. I'm excited to see what happens in Breath of the Wild 2, of course again followed by everything that's going on in Age of Calamity and what I'm going to experience in Breath of the Wild. And honestly, I'm hoping Ganon doesn't win, so let's see what happens at the end of this game. I need him to get bodied. Again, thank you Nintendo for providing a review copy of the game. Greatly appreciate it. Be sure to like the video if you enjoyed this, and be sure to leave a comment letting me know what you think of Age of Calamity. And of course, be sure to subscribe. Thank you guys so much for watching. Take it easy. Peace out. Deuces.